Hello, I'm Teacher Corinne, and I wanted to talk about what a lot of people identify as their biggest problem when they're going through the mock process, and even a lot of regular teachers say they need to improve this, and that is pacing. And pacing is not really a straightforward problem. It's not just finishing things on time. A lot of those other skills that you want to use in the classroom can impact your pacing. So I kind of had 9 ideas that I wanted to share that hopefully will help you improve your pacing in the classroom. So my number 1 tip is to adapt to your student. So as soon as you meet your student, even a regular student, you're starting to assess kind of where they're at and maybe even what kind of mood they're in that day to see how you're going to take the rest of the class. So you could practice one way as much as you want, but you're constantly making those choices to adapt to that student. Something I actually even do is I'll have a few rewards out each day, and based on that kind of quick assessment of that student, I'll pick what reward I'm using. So maybe it'll be something more involved and more interactive, but that takes a little more time. And maybe it'll be just something kind of straightforward where they're collecting something, which just kind of is faster and takes less time. So thinking about immediately how you're going to start adapting and how you're going to do the rest of the lesson based on that student's abilities. Number 2 is setting your procedures early. A lot of that is your TPR that you're going to be using to help the student know what you expect them to do. Of course, the classic cupped ear lets the student know that you are waiting for them to respond. So this is very important to start using right away, and so the student can understand that that's what that means. And so anytime you're waiting for them, you can patiently do this. When you want the student to repeat, you can use this so they know what to look for and what to repeat. Same with corrections, nice and focused, and they can repeat. When you want a student to read, thinking about how you can make that really efficient. Sometimes people do these really long sentences. Can you please read the second sentence underneath the picture for me, please? And then the student reads a quick three-word sentence. So one thing that a lot of teachers kind of gravitate to is, please read. Simple, straightforward. They also have their TPR for the student to see. Also very helpful to underline or mark on the slide where you want them to read so that they have multiple ways that they are knowing what to do. So definitely consider doing that. Doing full sentences is also important for the student to do. So if the student doesn't do it once, I'll usually give them that full sentence along with my symbol. The next time I'll ask them for that full sentence and continue using that. So in the future, if the student forgets as they're doing it, I might just do this and they go, oh yeah, full sentence, and they self-correct without you having to even ask them. So setting those up can really be super helpful in reducing kind of wasted time in the future. Number 3 is to focus on the slide goal. So as you're preparing for a lesson, look at the teacher directions and figure out, what does the student need to do on this slide? So look at target sentences. Are they circling something? Are they reading something? And make sure that your goal is to get that student supported to do that objective. So if there's maybe some other sentences that they know or things that may be appropriate on that slide, really be careful about choosing those because they may be okay to use, but if it takes 4 minutes to do one slide, suddenly you're behind and there's an issue. So really be aware of the things that you're using. Number 4 is to extend after that target is reached. So I wanted to mention extension again because it is so important. You want to get the student to the point where you're extending that to the next level. But be careful that you are being aware of that main target of the lesson. And once you reach that, start thinking about, okay, do I have time for this extra question and this extra thing we want to explore? So extension is important. Just make sure it's happening after the target is met. Number 5 is to model. Just do it. Show the student what you want them to do, especially when there's multiple chances for the student to do an activity. Just on that slide, show them that first one. And that's really the clearest way that they'll understand your expectations is by showing them. Even at higher levels, it's good to kind of demonstrate what your expectation is. One thing I always like to think about is if there is a chaotic, crazy way for a student to do a slide, they will probably find it. So it's really good for you to show them exactly what you want them to do and then help support them into that point of being independent. So you'll often hear that referred to as I do, we do, you do. And so you want to support that student from you kind of showing them what you want and then slowly get them to the point of being independent. And so that will help save a lot of time if you show them that first one and you're not wasting time with them being confused. Number 6 is less props and more TPR. So having props is so important. It is important to have props and they're useful to help extend and help engage the student. So absolutely using props is important. But sometimes you'll find someone who's rabbit, dog, and you're losing these gaps in time when there may actually be a picture of the dog on the screen that you can circle. So think about the props that you're using, are they helping to enhance the lesson? Something like maybe pulling out a bear flashcard, which may be, good for the student to see, but if I go like, bear, to the student, and then they go, rawr, bear, suddenly we're laughing, we're having a good time, they're engaged, and maybe I didn't really need that flashcard after all. So thinking about different ways to show how to be, these different animals and things like that that you may be teaching and help the student to really be engaged. So props are super important. Just don't get overwhelmed with so many props that you end up being distracted and it reduces your pacing. So finding that balance is good. Number 7 is doing a focused correction. So when a student makes a mistake, don't spend a lot of time explaining that they made a mistake and going a long way to correcting them. So, for example, if a student was reading a sentence and they mispronounce the word cats, so as they're reading, I might, mark this as they go, and then depending on what it is, so maybe the student didn't say the S sound, I might circle that. So I don't really have to do a lot of explanation about what happened. I can just circle that. Cats. Cats. Good job. So that allows them to see that this is their mistake without you having to really explain it too much. So it is good to address the why of the mistake, but if you can simplify it as much as possible, that's fine. Also keep in mind, if this is, a long sentence, but the student said the rest of it correct, they don't need to hear you say the whole entire thing again. That is something that really can slow down your timing when you're overcorrecting and then you don't get to the material that you need to. Number 8 is a straightforward one, and that is practice using your mouse. So especially people coming in for a mock class who maybe aren't used to using their mouse very frequently, and so it's awkward, they're having trouble drawing lines and making circles, and suddenly it's impacting their pacing because they're struggling to change slides and things like that. So it's really important to just become comfortable with this before going into the classroom so that you're not wasting time. So if a regular student's across from you, they're going to start getting bored and they're going to not see your marks. You want them to read something and you're trying to underline it, but it takes so long that you lose that student's attention. So being really comfortable with your mouse is important. I have a few different things. I have a touch screen and I have my tracking pad. So there's a few different ways that I can draw. So I pick and choose based on what it is. So just be comfortable with those options that you have. And if you're still struggling, thinking about, okay, well, do I need to upgrade my mouse or something to help that, because it's such an important thing to help model everything smoothly for the student to do well. Number 9 is very straightforward, and that is watching the time. So that's what people are usually thinking about when they talk about timing and pacing, and kind of just keeping an awareness of that. One thing I recommend for people doing a mock class is to practice with a timer and use that same timer. Sometimes people, for the first time, they set up their phone and they put the timer on, and then the screen goes black after a few minutes and they have nothing to keep track of time. So make sure that you're practicing with what you're going to use and you know that it will last and stay on for you. Fortunately, if you're in a regular classroom, you can use the regular class timer in a VIPKID classroom, and so those are really useful for keeping an eye on that. Something that I do in my classroom is I give stars every 5 minutes, and I keep track of it right behind me. So I almost have this visual timer behind me that lets me know that where I am. So I know I need to be 20% into the class, 40, 60, 80, and finally that's my kind of end of the class star. So, depending on how many slides there are, I'm kind of constantly making sure I'm around that spot. If I'm getting ahead, I can extend more and I can do more of those things in the class. If I'm behind, I need to really focus and stick with those target objectives, but make sure I'm really modeling well for that student. All right, those are my 9 tips to help with pacing. So really thinking about how you are adapting to the specific needs of that student in that class, and kind of keeping track of time based on that. So you're not going to give the same lesson to the same students. That's never going to happen. So practice, but keep in mind that you are going to have to be shifting things around based on the needs of that student. I hope you found a few tips in there to help you with your pacing and improve that. Thanks. Bye-bye.